In this video, what I'm going to do is help your child become a high-achieving VCE student within 2 to 3 months and help them secure their dream career. Now, how I illustrate this is through something that I like to call the 3 levers of VCE success. This is something that I developed during year 11 and year 12. I applied it to my own scenario and I've been using it ever since to not only nail VCE, but also university and my career as well. Now, just a quick little intro about me. I used to study at Monash University, and at the same time, I taught at Monash University as well as an undergraduate teacher. I was teaching there for 3 years. Here's a picture of me teaching. It was one of the greatest privileges to be able to teach at the uni while also studying there. And it was a very rare privilege, and I was just really proud to be, representing myself well as not only a student, but also a teacher at the same time. And this is me winning the teaching award for Monash Engineering in 2022. Again, one of the greatest honors that I've ever had. And I guess it doesn't only showcase my teaching prowess, but it also illustrates how well I can connect with the students as well. And that's something that I really pride myself on, not only when teaching at uni, but also teaching for tutoring and VCE students as well. So that's what I used to do. But now currently I am a graduate engineer at a company called Jacobs. This is me on the job site, and I'm a power and electrical engineer working on some really cool jobs all over Australia. Now, if you want to find a system to bulletproof your child's VCE scores into the top 10% of the state and make sure they will not fall victim to the ATAR ranking system, then this will be the most useful piece of advice or useful piece of content you will ever come across. Now, the reason why I'm making this video is because the ATAR system is a system where you could almost think about exploiting it, because in any system, there's not only flaws, but there's also ways to, leverage your own opportunities. So most people, they don't really understand how the ATAR system works, and they don't really understand how the scoring system works. But if you understand these 2 principles, which I'm going to briefly go over in this video, then you and your child will have not only the understanding to how the ATAR system works, but also how to break through that mold and get into the top 10% of the state and of the country. Now, this video is only for you if you're determined to help your child shortcut the learning of the secrets to succeed in VCE. And you're probably at a point where you've most likely tried to convince your child to study and do homework, but sometimes it goes through in one ear and out the other. Now, the reason why I say this is because I can perfectly relate to this scenario. I have 2 younger brothers who are in VCE. And whenever I try to give them advice, they never listen. And regardless of how much experience I have, or regardless of, how many students I've taught in the past, they still don't listen to me. And it's completely fair enough if you think about it, because they don't see me as someone who's an expert in schooling. I'm just their brother. Same way that you're just your child's parent. So they're not going to listen to you for specific advice when it comes to schooling. And this is kind of why I've made this video. It's a way of presenting the same information that you and I can both relate to, but it's coming from a different person, which is obviously me. So by you sharing this video with them, you're not only relaying your own thoughts, but you're getting it put into this lovely slideshow, which I've put together. Now, this video is intended to help your child take advantage of the majority of students being stuck in the bottom 90% of the state without any guidance or expert help. And all that guidance and expert help, everything you need is in this video. Now, you should watch this video for your knowledge, and you shouldn't just send it to your student or your child, but you should send it to your child as well to make sure that they understand the process that it takes to succeed in year 11 or year 12. But again, it's really important for you to understand the process as well, because you can guide them along this path and you can ensure that they're doing the right thing. And as I said before, I know that it's difficult to talk to someone you know closely about an unrelated topic. And I know when I try and get my younger brothers in VCE to do something schooling related, they just never listen. And again, it's completely fair enough. Sometimes they just need to hear it from elsewhere, and that someone to deliver that message is me. Now, this case study video is going to save you a lot of time, and more specifically, it's going to save you a year's worth of trying to beg your child to study. And I promise that if your child implements everything I said in this video, their knowledge will increase by the time they hit their next SAC in a month's time and beyond that as well. And you might be thinking, that's a pretty bold claim. How can you increase knowledge that quickly? But the reason why I'm able to make such a bold claim is because this is exactly what I was able to do as I studied during year 11 and year 12. And I not only use this process for my students, but also refine this process for the hundreds of VCE students that I've taught from then until now. And I'm going to break down everything which I did, so your child can literally just copy me exactly step by step what I did, and they can get the same result if you want. Now, here's just a little bit about me. Just a quick summary about, my experiences and everything up until now. So my name is Adrian, and during year 12, my family could not afford tutoring for me when I was in VCE. Now, to compensate, I just found a lot of online resources which helped me, get through just a little bit beyond what the teacher was teaching me pretty much. Now, I achieved a decent ATAR, but what I'm most proud about during year 12 is the fact that I was able to maintain a lot of my commitments outside of school. So I played competitive soccer during year 12. I worked part-time during year 12. Now, both of these commitments were actually a decent amount of time. If you have your child playing sport, you probably understand that they have multiple training sessions per week plus game day for soccer, but it might be some sort of other competitive way of competing for other sports. Part-time work, again, that's probably about 10 to 15 hours. So combine them both together, it's a decent commitment. Also quite unique, I had to look after my brother with Down syndrome during year 12. And I was responsible for chores during year 12 for a 7-person household. So I didn't really want to step back from all of these commitments. And obviously the bottom two, they're things that you can't really skip. I can't forego, looking after my brother because that's a really big responsibility, and I can't forego chores in a household with so many people. So I was able to maintain all these commitments, and I graduated with a 98.55 ATAR while maintaining them all very consistently. And I guess I am proud of my ATAR, and I was proud of my ATAR when I achieved it, but not necessarily because it achieved what I kind of aimed for, but at the same time, I achieved what I aimed for, and I still maintains the commitments that I mentioned above. Now, with this ATAR, I achieved my goal of studying engineering at Monash University, and I achieved a scholarship for studying engineering at Monash University as well. And I self-learnt knowledge for 3 different internships that didn't actually relate to my degree. So I actually used the same self-learning mechanism to not only succeed in VCE, but I took that knowledge through uni, and it allowed me to self-learn during uni, and it's helped me land a few internships as well. And through my teaching experience, I started teaching at uni while studying, and I've taught over 1,000 students in this time as well. And as I mentioned before, I achieved the Monash Engineering Teaching Award in 2022. Now, through this experience, I kind of developed my passion for learning and teaching. I was already doing some VCE tutoring here or there just as a part-time gig, but I really developed my passion for learning and teaching. And I started tutoring high school students, and since I started, I've taught over 100 high school students, specifically for VCE methods, but I've taught students for other subjects as well. Now, I didn't really want to tutor like everyone else out there with weekly sessions because I really found this unproductive. And I'm going to go through why this is unproductive through this video. But I think when it comes to weekly sessions, a lot of the time when you have tutors that are teaching your child, they're just going to be teaching them whatever they already learned in class. So it actually becomes very redundant, and you're paying a lot of money for tutoring because, let's be honest, tutoring is pretty expensive. But it becomes a problem. It's not necessarily a problem if it's expensive, if it's actually worth it. But the problem with a lot of tutors is that they're just regurgitating the same information that they hear in class. And they might teach it slightly better, they might teach it slightly worse, but the problem is it's pretty much the same thing. And that's what I kind of wanted to avoid when I started tutoring VCE students. So what I did was I started to put together my way of self-learning from all my commitments and made it work for year 11 and year 12 students. And my pathway to self-learning any concept I wanted to completely open up my opportunities. And now I have actually pursued a career in a field I didn't even graduate in. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm currently a graduate engineer at Jacobs, but the field I'm in is not actually the field that I graduated in. It's actually a bit of an unrelated field, but the thing is I self-learned the knowledge through my self-learning process to kind of catch up with the skills that I didn't have and allow me to apply and succeed in those other opportunities. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides is I'm going to just go through some projects which I worked on and some experiences which I gained. And for all of these experiences, I self-learned something using exactly the same process. So I got all of these following experiences as someone who was underqualified for the position. Now, the first one I have here is something that you probably haven't heard of. It's called Monash Motorsport. It's essentially a student club within university. It's a very prestigious student club. A lot of people from this club, they go to car manufacturing companies. A lot of them go to F1 teams such as Red Bull, Mercedes. I had a few friends go there. I've had a few friends and a few close friends actually move to Germany to work on a startup. And it was some car-related startup. But essentially, this student team opened up a lot of doors for me. And it gave me the potential to work on something like that in the future. So I self-learned car knowledge before the application and assessment, because this was obviously an essential part of trying to get on the team. And I eventually did. passed the interview. And I was able to work on a race car built from scratch that not only gave me the opportunities that I mentioned before, but allowed me to compete in international race competitions for 2020 to 2021. My next experience was at Monash Health. So what this was a project that was aiming to develop an app that helped in pediatric dosages calculations. So I self-learned coding and app development knowledge because this was not what my degree related to at the time. And I was able to work on an app that was actually used by Monash Health in their facility to calculate dosages for emergency situations. Now, this was very cool at the time, not only because I was, helping out the public sector, and it's a really cool thing to be a part of and a cool experience to gain. But at the same time, this was during the height of COVID. So helping alleviate the healthcare system a bit during that time was something that was quite rewarding and fulfilling to me. My next experience was at Rail Project Victoria. So this is just the government authority that helps deliver infrastructure and rail projects. So I had to self-learn train and rail knowledge for the interview and assessment. And as a result, I gained this experience on my resume, and I was able to work on rail projects worth billions of dollars for the government, such as the Metro Tunnel, which is nearly done. I think it's going to be done either end of this year or sometime next year. My next experience was an intern at Xero as a software engineer. So I had to self-learn front-end and back-end development skills for the interview and assessment. And as a result, I was able to work in a private company which pays 6 figures as a graduate. Now, I didn't actually take up this offer because I wanted to work in a different field, as I said at the start of this video, but it gave me the platform to potentially work as a graduate that got paid 6 figures. So I would say the doors that have opened up for me due to the self-learning skills that I've gained have definitely been second to none. My next experience was at Deloitte. If you haven't heard of Deloitte, it's a multinational consulting company. I had to self-learn business strategy and transformation skills for the interview and assessment. And this is because I don't have a commerce or business degree. So I had to self-learn all these business terms and all these strategy consulting terminologies and processes. And as a result, I was able to work in one of the largest consulting companies in the world doing business consulting without a business degree. My next experience was at Monash University. This is what I mentioned before, how I was teaching at the uni. So I had to self-learn how to actually teach people and engineering concepts relevant to the subjects that I was applying for. And as a result, I was able to work as the youngest teaching associate at Monash Engineering, teaching students, and some of which were older, which is an interesting dynamic. My current experience now, my current workplace is a company called Jacobs. So I had to self-learn electrical and power fundamental skills for the interview and assessments. And as a result, I'm able to work now as a power engineer, working for clients such as NEOM in Saudi Arabia. If you haven't heard of NEOM, it's that strip project. It's a very innovative project, the first of its kind for sure. And it's the largest project in the world at the moment in terms of value. And it's actually valued at $500 billion US, which is a lot of money. And last but not least, this company, Mind Learning. You can imagine starting your own business from scratch. It requires a lot of skills regardless of, what you're offering. So, outside of the actual tutoring and the teaching, there's obviously a lot of skills that you have to learn on the back end. So I had to self-learn marketing skills, ads, social media, sales, content development, etc. to build this very business. And as a result, I'm able to make an income and help hundreds of students over the past 3 years. So you can see how multifaceted these experiences are. There's experiences in all these different fields. We talked about teaching, we talked about my business, we talked about engineering, we talked about some software stuff, we talked about consulting. There's so many different skills that came as a result of, my drive. But in order to get these experiences, I had to self-learn. And that self-learning process started all the way from year 11 and 12. So that's the point of illustrating my experiences, is to show that self-learning really opens up doors in the future. So the reason why I was so determined to learn all of these skills independently and also so quickly was that I didn't want to fall victim to going down the traditionally long and boring path I saw everyone else around me take. I felt that if I didn't take control of what I was learning all the way back from year 12, then I would be stuck going down the same dead-end route with little to no opportunities to study and work in my dream industries. So I knew that I could open up doors for myself with self-learning, and I saw a lot of people around me just going through the motions. They just get a job that they kind of expected to get, depending on what the major that they majored in. And I just wanted to leave myself with as many opportunities as possible. So I decided one day during year 12 that the only thing that matters in life was my future, and that was solely in my hands and no one else's. And I told myself is that if there's something I need to learn, then I'm going to learn it in the most optimal way that outpaces the competition and gets me ahead of the rest. So this mindset that I developed during VCE did not only help me during VCE, it also helped me beyond that as well. So I became obsessed with learning the skills I needed to succeed in VCEs and beyond, because I knew that this would open up doors for me down the track, not only with a high ATAR, but the skills that I needed to learn anything I needed for in my dream career. So in this video, I'm going to break down the VCE Mastery Blueprint and the 3 levers that I developed for self-learning that unclog any bottlenecks in your child's learning process, so that they're going to be able to learn any concept efficiently and score high this year, and take that knowledge to succeed in their future career, which is probably the most important thing that you're thinking about right now and what your child's thinking about. Because it's one thing to succeed in VCE, but the life beyond that is equally as important. And then that's obviously why your child needs to focus on VCE now, because those VCE results only matter because what's the next step? It's going to be tertiary education or university education. So that's where VCE is important. It's just a lever or a stepping stone to the next step in life. And I believe that after this video, you and your child will be able to leave the video with so much value that you'll be able to change their life and the whole trajectory of their VCE life within a matter of months by taking the information in this video. And the reason why I'm making this video is because I'm looking for driven students who are hungry to do really well in VCE, so they can learn not only to get into their dream course, but also self-learn any skill for their future career. And I want to be able to work personally with them and with you so that they can quickly move on to bigger things in life, such as catching up with the content in a short time frame, getting ahead of the competition with theory, refining theory with application practice, and building confidence before Saxon exams. But obviously, the result of these 4 things is just going to be not only a higher ATAR and higher VCE scores, but higher potential for later in life as well, which is what we're obviously looking for, because obviously you want your child to succeed and you want them to not only do well in VCE and have the skills to be able to use later in life, but you probably want them to have a balanced lifestyle as well. You don't want them to give up sport, you don't want them to give up part-time work, and you probably don't want them to give up their social life and their interaction with you at the same time and not sacrifice everything. So what I'm going to tell you right now is that this is definitely possible, but you have to take action now, and they have to take action now at the same time, just to make sure that they develop that process now, so when it gets heavy later in the year and towards exam period, that they've already developed that process and those habits, so they can just kind of switch into that mode, but they're not necessarily just going 12 hours a day of study, because obviously people get burnt out by doing that. And what I'm saying is that you don't need that much time. You just need to study and use your time efficiently. But also what I want to do with this video, and another big goal of this video, is I want to help parents who cannot seem to manage to convince their child to study, and to provide them with the skills and the mindset to actually stay accountable this year. And your child is, believe it or not, only 3 steps away from getting there. And it's not a function of time. So it's not dependent on time. They're not going to realize it eventually. What they have to do is realize that there is a problem, and then this video is going to help them fix it. So getting to an outcome or being successful at anything in life, as you might know, it's not necessarily a matter of time. Some things you have to wait time to get, but a lot of the time, when it comes to something academic, it's just a matter of knowing what to do. And as soon as you implement it, then you can get the results as quick as you're kind of determined to get them. And yes, the average person will probably never learn these skills before they actually finish VCE. However, you know your child is not average, and that's why you're actually watching this video in the first place, because it's not targeted towards people who are aiming for average. It's targeted towards people whose children are going for the top 1, the top 5, or the top 10% of the state. And I want you to believe that this is definitely possible after you and them learn the 3-step framework, which I'm about to outline in this video. And this is only for you if you actually care about your child excelling in the learning in VCE in the fastest way possible, and you want to be proud of their improvement during VCE. Now, here's the secret about VCE that no one is going to tell them. They can absolutely break into the top 5 to 10% of their class in the state if they actually understand the theory in class that they're taught from their teacher, and they retain the same amount of knowledge as the rest. Now, it's a simple equation. If you know roughly the same amount as someone in the top 5 to 10%, then most likely you're going to be able to score very similar to them. Now, the only difference between them and others right now is that the top 5 to 10% walk out of class remembering more than your child does. Now, obviously, there's a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to memorizing things in general, but there's some small tweaks that your child can do, and that's going to drastically improve the amount of knowledge that they retain. Now, all successful people in VCE, regardless of what subject it is, they need to have the theory as well as the application perfected. Because while the teacher teaches your child the theory, that's what they learn in class, they just learn the theory behind things, they need to be able to learn these skills as well as the applications. So the applications is something that the teachers don't necessarily teach very well or for a long period of time. They're more focused on the theory. So they need to learn both of these skills earlier than the rest and also independently, because sometimes the teacher doesn't teach it. So there's a lot of problems that students face or your child faces when it comes to learning things within VCE. But the problem is that no one teaches them how to actually learn it and what needs to be fixed. A lot of them just go into class and expect their teacher to spoon feed everything. But the problem is that school aims for teaching the average person, because it doesn't want to teach people too fast who might be, a bit on the slower side of catching up with content. And they don't want to teach people too slow, because then it's just going to not progress class that well. So there's obviously a middle ground that the school and the teacher is aiming for, and your child wants to be in the upper end of that. So how can they go the same pace as everyone else but still expect to get greater scores? That's why learning things independently and learning things earlier is essential for your child's success in VCE. Now, the people who do really well in VCE are the people who have perfected both of these, not just one. So they can learn things independently and they can learn things earlier. And these things are specifically the theory that is already learnt in class and the applications which go beyond what is taught in class. Now, everyone thinks that success in VCE is all about experience in terms of doing questions, and they think that they have to waste their time doing literally thousands of questions to get their dream scores. Now, personally, I did do a lot of questions when revising for VCE, but it's purely because I didn't know what else to do in that time. But if I knew what I knew now, I know that I wouldn't have to do as many questions as I did and waste as much time as I did. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to give away all my spare time and sacrifice my well-being to learn the hard way when I can simply just learn the easy way. Now, most VCE students, they don't know the easy way because they haven't heard of these 3 levers of self-learning within VCE. Now, this is the traditional way of learning, or just the traditional way that your child's currently learning. When you ask most VCE students where they're at in VCE, you'll notice that most people are stuck at knowing the theory, but not knowing how to apply these skills to exam style questions at all. If you ask your child right now what their biggest problem is in VCE methods, they're going to say they know the theory and they feel like they know everything in class, but when it comes to tests, they don't know how to answer questions. Now, this is not only a common problem that everyone has, but there's specific reasons why this problem is occurring. And it's what I talked about in the previous slide. Teachers only teach the theory, and then it's an expectation for students to just be able to know how to apply these to test scenarios. But the problem is that those skills to actually be able to apply to test scenarios are skills that you can actually learn, and they're skills that some people learn and others don't. Now, their knowledge right now is being capped by their teacher, that is teaching them all of the content or all of the theory. So they're stuck at knowing the theory, but then they're never actually exposed to application questions that are the only ones that actually increase their SAC grades and their exam grades, because they're not testing theory type questions, because the theory is just the basis or the foundation. They're only testing the application questions, which are the ones actually on the exams. Now, what ends up happening is that they'll just pay attention in class and they'll just keep up to date with class, but then they realize that towards getting closer to tests and getting closer to exams, they're going to have to cram the content and applications leading up to assessment. And this is just to scrape a half-decent grade probably. But they're still disappointed to not achieve their desired grades that they had aimed for at the start of the year. So it's a bit of disappointment after exams because they feel like they've worked very hard because they're just following what the teacher's done and they're learning everything as much as they can, and then they still don't get a perfect grade. And then they're disappointed because they feel like they've done a lot of work, didn't get a good grade. And this is the case because teaching in class is not done optimally. So your child is actually going at a pace that is determined by their class and their teacher, and this will lead to an average level of knowledge and results, as we discussed in the previous slide. And they actually have no control at the speed at which they learn right now, and they don't actually work on the application questions, which are vital for exams. And just imagine them working hard and doing the same exercises as the people that they're trying to be better than. It just doesn't make sense because you're doing the same as everyone else. You're expecting a different result though. They will never know how long it would take them to learn all the skills needed as a top 5 to 10% student in the state, because this is not taught in class. The teachers are just aiming for teaching the average student. And they'll never have access to the resources and the expertise to help them turn from the theory in the textbooks to useful knowledge to master applications on SACs and exams, because these resources don't really exist and they're not given out by class. And if they are, they're very limited resources. And if your child were to learn these skills independently, it would take years to learn them and master the applications if you just expected it to happen naturally, specifically without practice. But unfortunately, VCE requires mastery of applications pretty much instantly, because as soon as you learn something, a few weeks later, you're going to have a test on exactly the same thing. So it's unrealistic to expect your child to just learn everything independently. Again, remember what your goals are for them and the goals they have set for themselves, but also think about what the steps are to actually get there. So, in summary, they need to master the theory before class even teaches it. And we're going to go through these steps later in this video as well. Then they have to master the applications specifically to test type scenarios. And then they have to refine the question styles that only 1 to 2% of the state can answer correctly. So this is the process to self-learning and also improving your scores within VCE to break you into the top 5 to 10% of the state. Now, this is probably how your child studies right now. It's a pretty simple process. They start here. They go through the textbook independently. This is in an ideal world, by the way. They go through the textbook independently, but most students don't do this. They just pay attention in class. It's fine. So they pay attention in class and they think that that's what's teaching them the content perfectly. And then they straight away just go to some SAC style questions. So if they understand a SAC style question, then they think that they've mastered a topic after just doing one practice. It's fair enough. That might be all that they're given in class. And if they don't understand it, they'll just review the solution to understand it in quotation marks. And it's in quotation marks because it's meant to be a bit of sarcasm. Because just looking at a solution is not teaching anything. It's just showing you how to do those steps. And most students, they just look at them and then, again, it just goes through in one ear and out the other, because you can't just look at something and expect to remember it. And then they'll go through the question again or go through another question, and then they might consider themselves just done. Now, here's an upgraded way that your child can learn any topic or for any subject in VCE. So what they should do is first go through the textbook independently, and I recommend about 2 weeks before class. Now, this is a really good timeline to learn, and we'll talk about this exactly why later, but 2 weeks is just a nice time frame to learn things independently before class. Now, if your child understands basic examples, then they should just move on to refining their knowledge through paying attention in class. We'll go through that in a second. But let's say if they don't understand things through reading the textbook independently, then what they should do is find external resources to relearn the same concept. So an example might be my free videos. There's also plenty of other maths related videos and resources on the internet as well. Doesn't have to be through mine, but essentially what they're trying to do is just fill up the gaps in their knowledge that they couldn't gain by studying the textbook. Now, once they repeat that process, then they should pay attention in class. And only then will they have a complete understanding or a better understanding of everything, because they've self-learned everything in class, and then they're reconsolidating it when they pay attention to their teacher. And then they have this optimal understanding that kind of beats everyone else's, because no one else is really self-learning the content before class. But if your child gains that rich understanding, it's going to be a lot easier for them to succeed on tests and exams. Now, once they go through the stuff in class, then they should go through SAC or exam style questions independently. So they should source these resources from somewhere, whether it be their teacher, from myself, from other free resources online. And if they understand it thoroughly, then they should source more questions. Again, they could source it from their teacher. They could go through old exams from the old study design. They could go through my free resources as well. And then they should just keep on repeating that process. And this is an infinite loop. which means that it never ends. There's never a point where I say I'm satisfied with the amount of knowledge that I know, because each question is different and each question will therefore teach them something different, and they'll be exposed to more and more types of questions. The only time that this process kind of ends is when you've run out of time and you need to worry about something else. So for example, you might only have a set amount of time to study for VCE methods, but then you have a VCE English assessment. So you need to focus on that. But while you have time, you should keep on repeating this process for as many subjects as you can. Now, let's say if your child goes through the question and they don't really understand it. This is a better way to review a solution. The first step would be to look at the solution and write down the general process in digestible steps. So don't just look at the solution and say, okay, this is how I answered this specific problem. Look at the solution and write down what each step means, or where that general step comes from. So then when you get a similar question in the future that has the same concept, but it's a different scenario, then they're going to be able to apply those same general steps again. Now, after that, doesn't end there. They should rewrite the solution from scratch without actually looking at the solution. So they should put away the solution, put away their notes, take the question again on a blank piece of paper and try and do it again. And only then, when they can reproduce the exact solution and get it correct, that's going to be the point where they actually understand things. It's not going to be when they just look at the solution, and it's not going to be when they write down the general steps. It's they can actually reproduce the solution word for word without looking at anything else, and pretty much the same scenario as you would on a test. They can answer it correctly and they've got it 100% right. At that point, I would say that they've mastered that question and mastered that concept, but not before that. Not just looking at the solution. That's not going to get your child anywhere in terms of their learning. It's just going to help them rote learn something. If you haven't heard what rote learning is, it's pretty much just memorizing something. We don't want to memorize things. We want to learn things thoroughly and in a rich capacity to be able to apply it to any other scenario in the future with a slightly adjusted twist. Because as you probably know from your assessments a long time ago now, the tests are meant to be, tricky, and they're meant to be unpredictable. So that's why we need to learn things to a rich capacity. Now, here's the VCE blueprint for shortening your child's learning curve and becoming an independent learner. Now, just as a reminder, we're not letting others, such as the teachers in the school, take control of their lives and their success. And we're not waiting around for their teachers to teach them. We're taking matters into our own hands to help them achieve their desired level of knowledge and goals in the shortest amount of time possible. Now, you are helping them implement the 3 levers of self-learning in order to get them into the top 10% of the state in VCE. Now, here's the 3 steps that I discussed briefly before, but there's just a bit more detail as to how your child can actually apply these skills and learn everything independently. Now, the first step is to learn the theory 2 to 3 weeks before class. Now, the reason why I say 2 to 3 weeks is because they can learn it earlier if they want, but the problem is that no one has that much time. So 2 to 3 weeks is pretty reasonable to expect someone to actually learn things earlier. If you do it, let's say 1 to 2 weeks, that's fine as well, but 2 to 3 weeks is a nice barrier, because when you start something 2 to 3 weeks earlier, they're going to finish it 2 to 3 weeks earlier, and that buys in that small, but still sizable gap leading up to assessments, so they gain 2 to 3 weeks to specifically study for assessments. And by gaining 2 to 3 weeks, you can implement step 2 and 3 more thoroughly as well, which we'll go through in the next slides. So what they should do is learn the theory 2 to 3 weeks before class through the following steps. The first step is to read the textbook independently. And then I actually didn't write this down, but they should take notes independently and digest those notes as well. So writing notes in their own words helps them digest it as well, and it helps them get their own understanding of the content based on what's in front of them. And then they should attempt the textbook examples independently as well. Like, these are the ones that are assigned in class. They can just do it now. They don't have to do it later, because there's no point doing double work. They might as well just do it now ahead of time. Then they should relearn the theory through their tutor. So this is just another means of learning, but this is if they have one. If they don't have one, it's perfectly fine. You can skip this step. And then they should relearn the theory through other resources, such as my free videos online. They should learn it through an alternative textbook and some other means, whatever the means they have, access to. And then, after these 4 steps, they pay attention in class. So you can imagine, if you learn something 4 times independently with 4 different means, and then you learn it a 5th time by paying attention in class, you can imagine how much they learn and how much they retain compared to the average student. and compared to the average person just paying attention in class. Most people probably don't even pay attention in class. And your child will learn something 5 times thoroughly where other people are hardly learning it once. Now, the reason behind this is to increase the frequency at which they learn. Not necessarily just increasing the total study time, because someone might spend 3 hours in one go learning these skills, right? Or they can spend, half an hour on each one. And that half an hour on each one is more valuable split up over multiple periods of time because you're increasing the frequency at which you study something, because that's the key to memorizing information. And this is illustrated through this process here, or this diagram here. It's called the curve of forgetting. I'll just give a quick summary. As you increase the frequency at which you expose yourself to some sort of stimuli or material, the amount you retain in the long term increases. So if you just study something once, that's represented by this black curve here. So you memorize a certain amount at the start, and then you just forget it over time. You see the amount retained in the long term is literally 5% or less. And as you increase the frequency, the long term retention increases, it increases again, it increases again, and it increases again. So as you increase your frequency, you have a higher percentage of retention of information. So that's the idea behind, learning something with a high frequency. Now, the second step to this process is to do practice and exam style questions way before your child needs to. So this is done through the review section of the textbook, which is kind of good. It's pretty limited, but it's a good start for sure. Definitely something they can get access to for free because they should have the textbook. They could also go through past exam questions. These are all available online and you can access them at any time. So there's no excuse to, start doing exam preparation late. And I suggest, right now it's 30th of May, I'm recording this video. They can start doing exam style questions for the topics that they've already done right now. And this will not only help them for the exams in the long term, but it will help them for their SACs and their knowledges right now as well. So those questions they have access to all the time, they can literally just start working through it right now. They can also do SAC questions or SAC style questions from their school. And they could also go through external application resources such as my ones. They could go through an alternative textbook and whatever other resources they can get their hands on. The last step of self-learning is to refine the knowledge through practice, SACs and exams in exam conditions and exam pressure. This is really important because a lot of people, they do exam revision, but they don't do it under that pressure scenario. And obviously it's hard to replicate the pressure of a test or an exam, but they should do it under the conditions as best as they can and just replicate thinking in that short period of time. So this can be done through timed SACs, it can be done through timed exams, it can be done through live testing with a friend and explaining the process. So this is kind of like, let's say, we're trying to work through something and we're just testing each other. For example, how do I solve this type of question? What are the steps? What are the steps that you would take? If you can describe them aloud, this is kind of just, thinking aloud, and then, writing the steps is something that's pretty easily done once you can develop the process in your head really quickly. And then when they notice problems, they just go back to step 1 and 2. So to be refining the theory and then refining basic SAC and exam style questions, and then just kind of continuing that iterative process of refining the theory, refining the applications, doing tests to consolidate your knowledge, and then going back and refining the gaps, and then going back and refining the gaps again. And that infinite loop will kind of close up eventually once they've, kind of utilized as many resources as they can get their hands on. Now, every single time your child and I, perfect a new problem-solving technique, it increases our leverage. Now, what exactly does that mean? It's illustrated through this diagram here. So imagine me pushing down on this side of the beam. I'm pushing down at a certain, amount of effort, and I get a certain amount of return on the other side. Now, what the idea of, learning things optimally is increasing the leverage at which I have, or increasing the leverage that I have when I study. So if you imagine a longer distance here, what's happening is if you put a certain amount of effort, you're going to get a much higher return because of this imbalanced diagram. But it's imbalanced to our favor because it's on our side. We're creating the longer distance on our side, and that's called leverage. Now, it eventually gets to a point where your child is going to have to put in only a minimal amount of effort to get a good score and the same score as everyone else who's putting in a lot of effort. But the only thing that increases is their leverage as a VCE student, and that increases through just having a better skill set. So they're going to develop a mastered VCE skill set, and they'll be able to accelerate towards VCE success faster than other people because they have this leverage or this skill set. And As a summary, as I said before, this means that they can work the same amount of others or the same amount of time as others, but achieve more in the long run. Now, here's some steps or here's some tips to help them implement this system. So right now, your child has a lot of ambition, and that's the only reason why you're watching this video. And you also have high hopes for them. But what is limiting them right now is their current skill set and their current mindset. So firstly, they want to learn the theory well, but they have to learn at the school's pace and not their own, which is a problem. The second problem is that they want to master the applications, but this is actually not taught in class by their teachers because the classes are restricted to just learning the theory. And thirdly, they didn't know that it was possible to learn the theory and applications independently and fast as well. Now, this was me. This is a visual representation of me when I didn't understand the ideal process and I didn't stack these 3 levers of self-learning in VCE, which I discussed before. So you can see I'm putting in all this effort and all this input, and I'm only getting a very minimal output because I have a bottleneck here. So this bottleneck is the wall. And this bottleneck right now, for them, for your child, and also for me back in VCE, was my skill set or my ability to self-learn. Now, when I developed that ability to self-learn, the wall opened up and the bottleneck opened up and allowed me to, put in a certain amount of effort, which is over here, and increase my output on the other side. Now, all the materials needed for their dream VCE outcome, along with the blueprint to success, is on the other side of this wall. And some people don't even know what it takes to maximize their VCE scores, when they can not only learn it, and your child can learn it, but your child can literally learn it within a matter of months and perfect it right now to be able to apply to an exam scenario. Now, if you've made it this far, this is my offer for you. I'm opening up my doors to personally take on a few more serious VCE students who are serious about accelerating and growing ahead of the competition, instead of just keeping the same pace as others in their class. And my mission is only to work with the following types of people. It's 1, parents of VCE students who have high hopes for their child, but they don't necessarily have the time and the flexibility to babysit them. Because we all know, you're a parent, you have a busy life, you have other things to worry about. You don't really want to be looking over your child's shoulder 24/7. Now, the second type of person I'm trying to work with is VCE students who understand the value of mastering the theory quickly to buy time leading up to assessments, as I talked about in this video. The next type of person is VCE students who believe that learning the theory passively and slowly the traditional way during class is not going to help them achieve their dream grades. And it hasn't helped them up until now. And what they want to do is learn and develop the shortcut to learn anything that they need to within a matter of months. Now, the last thing is VCE students who have high ambitions. I want to work with these type of people who want a 90 ATAR and are aiming for a high achieving course, such as medicine, engineering, commerce, or law. And these are courses that our past students have aimed for and our past students have achieved as well. Now, this is how your child would be studying with me. It's a very similar flow diagram to before, but there's a couple of red boxes here. Now, these are the ones that I specifically help with on a significant level. I help with every step of this process, but the red boxes are the ones that I really emphasize when I work with people one-on-one. So the first thing is that when students go through the textbook independently and they don't understand something, then obviously there can be a bit of a roadblock when it comes to that. So what I allow students to do and how I provide for students is I help them go through the content with my premium content that I've developed over the last 3 years, and we go through it live together in classes as well. And we'll perfect the content together and we'll make sure that everything is established in that foundation before they move on to application type questions. Now, when they're sourcing SAC style questions, what they can do is they can source more questions from me. And these are actually custom made resources to specifically help you with your problems. So just recently, I had a student join who wanted some resources that related to some skills that they knew would be on their SAC. So I just made some questions that had those same concepts, just to a new context. So that type of thing is what I provide to my private students as well. It's those custom made resources which you can't really get anywhere else. Now, the last thing I do is, let's say if your student and your child can't understand a SAC style question or application style question, what I offer is an opportunity to go through the application problems with me together, one-on-one, and break down and understand the process together so that when they get a new problem, which I'll provide them as well, they'll be able to apply and just refine that skill very thoroughly. So if you understand the value of developing skills to accelerate their VCE success, and you're not really satisfied with the slow and traditional way, but your child is a highly ambitious person, here's my offer. I'll personally show you and your child how to implement the following. So I'm going to teach your child all of the VCE self-learning skills and VCE method-specific theory based on where their current skill set is lacking. Not just cookie-cutter classes that you could get from anywhere else, just on YouTube or anything. So I'm going to allow your child to learn at a high rate of success with the following kind of perks that you get as working with me. So for you, if you're a parent, you get weekly progress check-in via email to track the progress of your child to make sure that they're actually progressing with their work. A lot of people, they just get tutoring and they don't really see any progress. So we have tangible ways of showing progress and then also relaying back to you to see that your child's actually progressing. We also have monthly calls to discuss significant milestones achieved while you're working with us. Now for your child, what they get is 2 to 3 individual check-in calls per week. Now these are 45 to 60 minutes each. So there's a pretty significant amount of calls that you get with me one-on-one. They also get one group call every fortnight with me, excelling through the theory with other students who are aiming for 90 plus ATARs. This is just a group call that goes through the theory on a more general sense, but most students, they more look forward to the individual tutoring sessions, which kind of makes sense. The tutoring sessions aren't necessarily the most traditional ones in terms of it's just me teaching the theory. What I want to go through is more so what they're struggling with, targeting those things, and then giving them tips and advice for moving on later. Now, obviously, I do teach them in the classes as well, but you can kind of think about it as half teaching, half accountability at the same time. And the good thing about doing 2 to 3 per week is that there's a high level of accountability because literally the next session will be within 2 to 3 days' time from the previous one. So you can imagine if your child's doing something every 2 to 3 days with methods, then they're just going to get into the habit and the routine, and that's going to build up over time. What they also get access to is daily messaging to keep them accountable and receive their progress updates as well. So they're able to message us on our platform and they can kind of just relay information and ask questions in between sessions as well, which is also a vital thing. Now they also get access to hundreds of videos covering the theory and application questions for VCE methods. And they get access to thousands of questions specifically designed to help them master VCE methods with the least amount of work as well. So there's a lot of online resources that we have that I refer to as well during my sessions and in between sessions as well. So they can literally learn anything at any time. They don't have to limit it to just the course. Now, as a bit of a bonus, what your child will get is 2 books mailed to your door. So one is a CAS guide. Now, if you don't know what the CAS is, it's just a fancy word for the calculator. Conveniently, I'm at my desk and this is what the CAS guide looks like. It's just like a physically bounded book. It teaches everything that they need to know about using the calculator with step-by-step processes with images like that. So they get one of them mailed to their door. Very useful for assessments because you can bring in a bound reference. And they're also getting a similar book with just a bunch of SAC and exam style questions. So if you've heard of VCA checkpoints, and you might have bought it for your child before, we just have our own version which is just pretty much that on steroids with heaps of questions of varying difficulty. And I've taken inspiration from a lot of other school SACs as well. And it also comes with solutions as well, which is also really important because I don't think VCA checkpoints comes with actual walkthroughs of how to solve the questions, whereas our book does. What I also provide is a custom study plan for every week. So I assume your child has a busy schedule with sport, with work, and they want to maintain those things. What I'm going to do is develop a study plan that is specifically catered to their specific schedule. And what there also is a 3-session self-learning course, which is applicable to all subjects. So it just goes through the self-learning process more thoroughly and gives them tangible tips to take away for any VCE subject. And honestly, any topic later in life as well. As I discussed before, the self-learning process can be used for university, it can be used for VCE, it can be used for anything that they really want to learn in life. Now, suppose you're watching this and you generally have the desire to help your child and you want your child to develop that hunger to self-learn any skill in VCA quickly and beyond, and just move on to the next stage of their professional life with confidence and top learning ability, because you know that learning is the cornerstone behind success in kind of any facet of life. So what I have is a link below so that either a parent or your child, but ideally both, can book a call and we can map out a roadmap for their career and figure out which step of the learning process is the bottleneck or the hurdle for them, and then unclog that whole learning process literally within a matter of weeks. There's only one thing you have to do. All you have to do is decide is that if your child wants to succeed and in the best possible way this year? And if the answer to that question is yes, then book a call and we'll discuss how I can do that for you and for them as well.